Welcome to Bible Believers Fellowship and the ministry of bbfohio.com. As we begin this study taught by Brother Stephen Miller, it's a second part to the message titled, Should Christians Own and Carry Weapons of Any Kind? This is part one of two.
One of the big things is, one of the big things that I thought of that an argument against Christians carrying firearms and using firearms or weapons is that for this dispensation. So as a dispensationalist, you have to say, well, are we in a dispensation where you need to protect yourself with guns, or is that just in other dispensations? So you have to be careful about that, and so we're going to cover a little bit of that tonight. And basically what I wrote is just 7 quick Bible verses that will help you in your argument for owning and arming yourself. So, and actually, Mariah and I, we're going to go on vacation here pretty soon. Not vacation, but my mom's birthday, we're going to go flying down to North Carolina and then flying back. And I took one extra day off, so I'm going to do a 3-day weekend. So we're going to fly with a toddler down to North Carolina. So that's going to be like 8 hours of traveling. And then we're going to spend basically one whole day down in North Carolina. And then we're going to fly with a toddler back up to Ohio. And one of the things that I thought of was, well, gee whiz, do I want to take my gun on the airplane? Because, there's a crucial amount of time. And I don't know, have you guys ever flown with a firearm? I'm the only one so far. You've flown with a firearm, okay. So with a handgun, it's pretty easy. You just put it in a little case, and it goes really well. I've done it several times. You just have to go to the checkout counter and declare your firearm. And I recommend you go to the airline's website, do exactly what they say, because I went to one airline and they were lax on their rules. And this was after 9/11 and everything. They were completely lax on their rules. And then I went to another airline and they were very strict, and it caused problems. We almost missed the flight because we had to go dump all our ammunition and all that kind of. My brother and I, we both flew with guns. And you can fly with guns. I don't know if you knew that or not, but you can fly with guns as long as you declare them. So it's, you're supposed to do that. They have to go in the baggage compartment. You don't get to carry your gun with you on the airplane. But so one of the questions that I had was, we're going to do this. We got to turn around very quick. We go down to North Carolina, and then we're going to jump in a car and leave very quickly. So one of the things that I wanted to do was just have carry-on bags. I didn't want to have to go stand in, like you guys have flown before, where you got to go stand there and you're waiting for the baggage person to put your bag on the little belt, and you look up at the clock and it's like an hour after you've landed. And believe me, I know a guy who works at the airport. They work very, very hard, but just the volume, you're always the last person to have your bag come off the conveyor belt. It's always like that. So that's just the way it is. It's it's a catch-22 or something like that. I don't know, but it's the devil. That's what it is. Anyway, so I was thinking, I'm not going to fly with my gun. I'm not going to go through the hassle of checking it in. And sometimes they do it last. They give you your firearm last because they actually have to give you your firearm. They don't just put it on the little conveyor belt. Some airlines do. They just put it on the conveyor belt and they're like, whatever. But sometimes the guy walks out and says, "Are you Steve Miller?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm the only one here." And he's like, "Can I see your ID?" I was like, "Nope, just give me my bag," because that's what the federal government requires. You put it on the belt. That's what they said, put it on the belt. So I take my property and I leave the airport. So but the issue was, should I go through the hassle of doing that? But then I thought, especially after doing this study, I have a 2-year-old, and I have a wife, and I was actually, before I sat down and did this study, that I was not going to fly with my gun. I wasn't going to do it just because of the hassle. But now I'm convinced that I would be going against God if I didn't. I would be. It's a thing where after doing this study, I'm convinced that I would be not right with God if I did that. So I'm actually commanded, we're going to see that, where I'm commanded to protect my wife and to protect my child. It's a command in the Bible. So it's going to get just, so we're going to see that. So turn to Genesis chapter 14. Go to verse 14. We'll get into it. But you're commanded to protect the weak. But we'll see. We'll see here. This is a story about Abram, and what happened here. This is actually. I don't know if you guys have ever read Genesis or read this story before, but basically what happened was basically Lot, Abram's brother's son. It's Abram's brother's son, right? Yeah, Abram's brother's son. He was captured by this confederation, and then he was taken away, and this confederation of kings, and he was taken away, and Lot's land was taken away. And what happened was this confederation attacked Sodom and Gomorrah, and took Lot, and Abram found out about it, and so Abram did some stuff to get his guy back. And go to Genesis. We'll start in Genesis 14:14. It says, "And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, with 318, and pursued them unto Dan. And he divided himself against them and his servants by night, and smote them, and pursued them unto Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus." So I want you to see this, that Abram, now everybody knows Abram by his Jewish name, Abraham. Okay, and we know that later on, God made a covenant with Abram, and Abram circumcised himself, and he became Abraham. He became a Jew. So I want you to notice that it doesn't say Abraham, it says Abram. So this is before Abraham was Jewish. So this is actually, Abraham, in effect, was a Gentile at this time. God was speaking to a Gentile. So it has to be clear that this is a story about Gentiles, not Jews. And that distinction has to be made. It's for Gentiles in particular. So I want you to also notice that Abram had arms to arm his servants. Abram, a private citizen of the valley, just some dude, had at least 318 weapons of war. Okay, so when I hear people say, hey, should the man of God have an arsenal? Well, he has it right there. He has at least 318 weapons that could kill people in an efficient manner. Because, I mean, it doesn't say that he lost any men in this fight. So he had pretty good weapons. He had modern weapons. Okay, modern weapons. It's also, Abram had trained men. Trained and armed militia is the most base and fundamental force a people group can have. So you have, right now we have police. We have police that go out and around. Well, those police are trained, but they're not the militia. The militia is actually everybody in this room. Okay, it's just the average person. A militia is a person who is just a private citizen. They can come and go into their military unit as they please. They don't have to be there. So if your house is being attacked or your land is being attacked, it's like, I always say, like, okay, well, if the, let's say if the Russians invade, let's say the Russians go down there and invade Virginia. They're going up there on Virginia. Well, what's going to happen? Well, we're all going to go get our guns and go down there to Virginia and go kill some Russians. That would be the militia. And we don't have to go, and the military can't say you can't leave, because that would be the militia. So a militia is just just a basic group of people, and that's what happened here. Abram armed his militia. Abram had a militia. The militia is the first line of defense from foreign invasion. The only way for a free people to have a trained militia is to have free people keep and bear arms. So they have to have, each individual person has to have a weapon. So if you don't have a weapon in your house, you can't go down to Virginia. You have to be issued a weapon. So then you're not part of the militia. So also look up here in, if you go up to verse 18, go up to verse 18. So this is what happened after this guy Abram attacked and destroyed these guys who captured Lot. And then up here in verse 18 it says, "And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him," that's Abram, "he blessed Abram, and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand, and he gave him tithes of all." So what happened when Abram went off and killed a whole bunch of people to protect his family and to protect his home and to protect his brethren? The priest of the Most High God came down and blessed Abram. Amen. So he didn't say, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you killing all these people?" What he did was this in Genesis, before Abraham was a Jew, before he was circumcised. That's a key. Before he was circumcised, the priest of God came down and said, "You're blessed for doing this." He didn't say you're cursed for doing this. He said you're blessed for doing this. So what have we learned from this? Or what we've learned from this is that Abram used self-defense and was blessed because of it. This is a self-defense action. When somebody comes and kidnaps somebody, it's self-defense when you go after the attacker and get your person back. So that's self-defense. If somebody, I don't know, you guys probably seen that movie Taken. You know, everybody's seen Taken. I mean, come on. Well, that was self-defense. That was when he went out and he got his daughter. That was self-defense. He defended his family. That guy in Taken. Now, when he then went on and killed the rest of them, that wasn't self-defense. That was vigilantism. So that has to be. That was vigilantism. So it may have been just, and it may have been what needed to happen, but that was still vigilantism. So you got a question?
Yeah, so what about incident that happened in Florida with the
That happens a lot. What are you talking about?
the
Flor-
parking space.
Stand your ground.
Oh,
The stand your ground thing. Was that self-defense?
I don't know what specific case you're talking about.
A man got shot because of the parking space.
From the evidence, it looks like it wasn't. In the one case that I'm thinking of, there was one case where it wasn't, even though
Yeah.
the plane came down. But that's just from a case by case.
Yeah.
The bottom line is it's self-defense, it's right. If it's not, it's not.
What happened
So,
was,
we're gonna.
this lady and this guy were arguing in the parking
Yeah.
lot.
That wasn't.
The guy
Came out as
the woman's boyfriend came out, shoved him to the ground, nearly could have killed him. And the guy reached inside his pocket and pulled it out.
Yeah, that's wrong because he had chances to get away.
Yeah.
And he was not. You have a responsibility if you can, you're to get away. And
It-
if they're shooting at you, that's different. But
I know how I was trained was that if you basically have in Ohio, I don't know about Florida, but in Ohio you have what they call an obligation to retreat, but you don't have an obligation to retreat out of a safe area. So what do I mean by that? So like if you have an obligation, if you can get out of the situation, it's like, okay, so we're in a church And if somebody comes through and they bust down your door with an AK-47 or something like that, I'm armed and there would be shots fired or whatever. But the first thing to do is to take cover and get out. So if you really, we're not. I want to get back to the Bible, but you gotta weigh your situation. So you do have an obligation to retreat, but we're retreated already. So when you're in your home, you're already retreated. So that's where you come into castle doctrine and stuff like that. Now when you're in your car, according to Ohio law, you're already retreated. You're retreated as far as you can go. But that doesn't mean that you can retreat with your car. You push on the gas and get out of there. Well, the problem is like if you're we've had situations like that where you're surrounded by protesters, you push on the gas and get out of there, you're going to kill somebody. So there's situations like that. And yeah, if the guy is not, it's one of those things where you basically that was most likely murder is what I from the information from what you told me. I don't know the specific case though.
Christian,
we'll talk about specific cases later.
We have the right to self-defense if we can't get out of the situation.
Yeah, I mean,
if we have an opportunity
right
to get out of the situation,
there's a lot of state laws that don't line up with Christianity also. And we're going to talk about that actually a little bit. There's actually in Exodus what the law says in Exodus versus what Ohio law says. And so we're actually, that's point number 3. So write down Genesis 14:14. That's one of your verses. And then write down Nehemiah. We'll go to Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 10 through 18. So that's where we're going to go next. Yeah, specific cases I can't speak to because I'm not that well informed. I always tell people that you should keep up on your current events, and I just don't know about that case.
what chapter?
Nehemiah chapter 4. He's building the wall. As Mariah and I were talking about the wall recently, the border wall. But here, Nehemiah is building a wall around Jerusalem. So in Nehemiah chapter 4, there's this dude named Nehemiah, and he's building a wall. I recommend you guys read the book. He's building a wall around Jerusalem, and there are some people who they don't want him to build the wall, and so there are external forces coming down and trying to attack the builders, the construction workers. So, and it has to be pointed out that these guys are just construction workers. They're building a wall. So it's like Charlie. He's an electrician. Charlie, does like electrical work and that kind of stuff. He runs wires. Yeah, he's an electrician. He's a construction worker. He's not a soldier. That has to be pointed out. So Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 10. It says, and Judah said, the strength of the bearers of the burdens is decayed, and there is much rubbish, so that we are not able to build the wall. And our adversaries said, they shall not know, neither see, till we come in the midst among them and slay them and cause the work to cease. So they want the work, these adversaries want the work to cease. Verse 12, it says, and it came to pass that when the Jews which dwelt by them came, they said unto us 10 times, from all places whence we shall return, from all places whence we shall return unto us, they will be upon you. So basically what's happening is they had some people come down and tell these Jews that told them 10 times that they're going to, these other guys are going to attack you. So the adversaries are going to attack the construction workers. So therefore, this is Nehemiah talking, it says, therefore said I in the lower places behind the wall, and on the higher places I even set the people after their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows, and I looked, and rose up and said unto the nobles and to the rulers and to the rest of the people, Be ye not afraid of them. Remember the Lord, which is great and terrible, and fight for your brethren, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your houses. So yeah, the property too. And it came to pass, when our enemies heard, they didn't see because they weren't there, but they heard that it was known unto us, and God had brought their counsel to naught, that we returned all of us to the wall, every one unto his work. Now, if it stopped right there, they would have put all their weapons down, and they would have returned to their work, because they took weapons up. The enemies saw they took weapons up and were ready to fight, so the enemies, the adversaries didn't come and fight. So remember we talked about this doctrine of overwhelming firepower, where if you say, hey, I will fight you and we have the means to fight you, generally criminals or people like that will say, well, we're not going to fight them because they'll hurt us. So it's kind of like when like everybody watches Shark Week. When the shark attacks, and he rattles the cage, and then you kind of poke the shark. The guy in the cage will poke the shark. Well, the guy can't do anything. The shark will kill him, but he's in the cage. He pokes the shark, and the shark goes away. Why? Because the shark's being poked. The shark could destroy the guy in the cage, but he doesn't want to get hurt, So it's like one time I was at the top of these stairs, and I was going to walk down these stairs, but there was this cat, and the cat was like, "Wow!" And I was like, man, I don't want to walk past that cat. Well, I could have just kicked that cat down the stairs, no problem. But I was like, man, I'm scared. Well, if I kick the cat, he'll get my leg. He'll scratch me. Or if I try and go by the cat, I just stayed upstairs. I was scared. I was scared of this little cat. Well, why? Because I didn't want to get hurt. So that's why you have like Mexico. I don't want to bash on the Mexicans. Canada. We'll bash on the Canadians. Canada has an army. So they won't be invaded because they have an army. But the United States could invade Canada very easily and take all their stuff. But people would get hurt. Americans would die. United States citizens would die. The Canadians would hurt us. And so we don't. There's other reasons why we don't, but that's one of the reasons. So there's because we don't want to get hurt. So that's what happened here. These guys didn't want to get hurt. It's verse 17. They said, they which builded on the wall, and they that bear burdens, with those that laden, everyone with one of his hands wrought in the work, and with the other hand held a weapon. For the builders, every one had his sword girded by his side, and so builded. And he that sounded the trumpet was by me. Nehemiah was saying this guy was by me. So they had, in one hand, they had their sword on them, and they had their weapon, and they had their plow also, or they had their shovel in the other hand. And actually it says, in verse 19 it says, and I said unto the nobles, and to the rulers, and to the rest of the people, the work is great and large, and we are separated upon the wall, one far from another. Oh no, I don't need to read that. I'm sorry. We're talking about some administrative work here. But basically, so what's saying is that they had a shield in one hand, and they had a shovel in the other hand. They had a sword in one hand, and they had their pick in the other hand. So they had a tool in one hand, and then they had a weapon in the other hand. So they were able to defend themselves. And you got to keep in mind, these guys were construction workers. They were not soldiers. These guys were building the wall. So, and they had to defend themselves. We have in the military, in World War II, one of the things that they started, because they during the island hopping campaigns in the Pacific, they had what they called combat battalions, and they called them CBs, or CBs, as you might say. And these construction battalions. So these construction battalions, what they would do is they would have a rifle, and maybe they set the rifle down there, and then they would have a shovel over here. And when the enemy attacked, they'd put down their shovel, and they'd pick up their rifle, and they would defend themselves. And ever since then, all the construction workers that went into, whenever the military would build something, they would arm their construction workers. So if you went to, let's say you were going to become a Marine. Well, when you become a Marine, you do things like sort mail, clean toilets, you do things like fix trucks, and you build structures, you build stuff, or you fix things. You have administrative duties. So they teach those guys, they teach the mail clerks in the Marines, they teach the clerks how to kill people, because they need them to be able to put the mail down and pick up a rifle and defend themselves, or to attack something. Send the band off to war, that kind of thing. Put your instruments down and go attack. The same thing, the principle is here in Nehemiah. So I'm sorry, I'm just reading over my notes. So if you notice, let's see, Nehemiah Nehemiah institutes the biblical principle of always being armed and ready to defend your people, your brothers, your sons, and your daughters, your wives, and your houses. God goes on to bless Nehemiah, and he blesses the Jewish people for what they did. And so once again, you have a blessing come down on these guys for defending their property. So that's Nehemiah chapter 4. There's the second verse. So go to Exodus 22. So verse number 3. It's going to be Exodus chapter 22, verse 2. So I can find it. Okay, so this is the law. So we're going to talk about God's law. So we talked about Nehemiah, who was under the law, and then we talked about Abram, who was not under the law. He was in a different dispensation. And so now we're going to talk about the law. So the law says, this is what God's law says. So this is what God instituted. So God's law, Exodus chapter 22, it says, if a thief be found breaking up and be smitten that he die, there shall no blood be shed for him. So keep that checked. Okay, so go back to Genesis chapter 9. So just remember that phrase: there shall no blood be shed for him. So what that's basically saying is that if a thief comes in and at night, and you kill the thief, no blood shall be shed for him. Now, that seems kind of strange, but go back to, because that phrasing is a little weird, Genesis 9:5. Genesis says, and surely your blood of your lives will I require. This is talking about if you kill somebody. So surely your blood of your lives will I require. So what it's saying is that if you kill somebody, that's what's called murder. If you kill somebody, God requires your blood. Actually, he goes on to say that another man will take your life. So if you kill somebody, then the other man comes and kills you. And that's talking about the government. The government comes along. So like, let's say you murder somebody, the government comes along, finds out that you murdered somebody, they try you, and then they say, oh, okay, you murdered this person, well then you have to be killed for murdering somebody, because life is holy, and people's lives are holy, and you just can't kill people. So yeah, well, I mean, obviously we're talking about the Bible, so people don't follow the Bible. So if the thief comes in, now this is an addendum. So in Genesis it says, hey, if you kill somebody, you're supposed to be killed. So then you have here in the law it says, well, if a thief comes breaking up and you kill him, if a thief breaks in